Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Silver. I'm the practice director for our security and compliance practice division here at Red Level. And welcome to CyberAware Week 3. So glad you could join us today. We have a really sad, interesting use case, case study to kind of go over here today. We're shifting gears a little bit from last week and the week before. If you attended our Modern Workplace Summit, I did give you a little bit of a kind of intro into this use case and specific case studies, but we're going to take a little bit deeper dive and talk about zero trust kind of as a larger framework and how it could have prevented this stuff from happening in this context. So thank you all so much for joining, and let's go ahead and dive in. Call this one Too Little Too Late. So these 3 clients, again, we're having 3 clients, but I'm kind of putting them all in one case study here. They didn't think they had substantial risk, right? They had minimal cloud services, whatever that means. And we reached out to them. We kind of circle back with our clients, and this is kind of a PSA like this presentation today, but also in life in general. We reach out to our clients. We say, hey, the game has changed. What you were doing 2 years ago is no longer adequate. You need to up your game. And they say, oh yeah, no, we've read the news. We heard about the pipeline issue, the breach of the pipeline and, all this stuff, and we're ready to go. And I'm like, great, let's go. Or they're like, we only do exchange online. We're not really doing that much stuff. And don't worry about us, right? And this is months ago, right? Now the Kool-Aid has been drank for all these clients, but a little bit doom and gloom and urgency with my messaging about this stuff, but that's evidence-based, right? I'm doing that based on real-world evidence, and this case study today of these 3 clients is part of that real-world evidence. Like, you don't have to look at the CrowdStrike reports or Microsoft or anything, or the DoD or the reports about breaching and compromise. We all know it is extremely pervasive, right? So yeah, basically we tried, they said, nah, they all got breached. Let's look at what happened, how it happened, and what could have been prevented. Really, what could have done to been prevented these attacks? That was really what we talked about on the first week and the second week. So if you didn't have a chance to attend those, please view the recordings of those. I go into a little bit more depth about like what we could have done. I think it's still interesting here to look at what happened in the first place, right? That's what we're going to do today. So we're kind of doing that in a little bit of reverse order, but I chose to do it that way on purpose. Great. So what happened? How did it happen? Let's go down the kill chain here. Leadership, finance, HR targeted for attacks. This is very common these days, as you know. Those represent high privileged accounts. If I get HR, I get HR data. If I get finance, I get finance data, because when I get those accounts, I get all those permissions. Leadership, obviously, they probably have access to all the above. There's a reason we design special policies for special people. This is why. They are the subject to more attacks, and they are the subject to lateral movement attacks. So a lot of times what will happen is a low importance frontline worker, office worker account will be targeted, and they'll sneak in and they won't do anything but try to get access to those high privilege accounts, right? They'll just use that as a lateral movement and escalation vector, as opposed to using that initial low privileged account to fish other places, to try to access resources, right? Because they probably don't have permissions for much. So just know that your leadership, finance, and HR, they will be targeted from outsider insider attacks and outsider attacks disproportionately, obviously, because of what they have. So yeah, all these accounts got compromised. In the case of one of these clients, it was an HR person. W-4s were accessed because they're worth their weight in gold. In another one, there was a phishing chain reaction, which is horrible, but it's almost a best case scenario these days, which is very morbid, and I'll go over to that in a minute. And then in the third one, there was a very interesting honeypot money request scam that I did talk about in the Modern Work Summit, but I'll rehash that here just because it was so fascinating. So, how it happened, let's go through that. Really, for all of these, the common denominator was social engineering. Now, what is social engineering? Social engineering is where I don't just send a lazy ass phishing email that says, "Oh, dear sir or madam, we've noticed that your mailbox is full. Please click on this link to add more storage." And there's spelling mistakes and the formatting's all weird. That's kind of the phishing that gets our grandparents, right? That our grandparents fall for. Unfortunately, they still fall for that stuff. But for the average information worker, or especially a CFO or an HR person or a finance person, they're more clever than that, right? They're not going to fall for that stuff. That stuff shouldn't be making it through your filters in the first place. So that's a whole other thing that you need to think about, is that if a bunch of these emails are making it to your end users, your DKIM, DMARC, SPF, spoof intelligence, anti-phishing, anti-spam are not configured properly. Very little of those kind of emails should be making it through to your users, if at all. So that's a whole other can of worms, right? Now, what social engineering is, though, it means that I'm actually going to be more clever. I'm going to get over some of those hurdles of spoof intelligence, phishing, DMARC, DKIM, SPF, safe links, safe attachments, right? I'm going to kind of get through your barrier defenses a little bit better with social engineering. And that is saying that you are targeting people specifically. You are learning about businesses. Oh, this is, Jennifer in accounting. I'm going to look at her Facebook profile to try to guess her passwords. If you are dense enough to go on Facebook and fill out oh, what's your favorite food? Oh, what's your favorite, when did you graduate high school? Those are social engineering traps. Stop doing those. You are giving hackers information about your security questions or your preferences or your potential passwords. Stop doing that. Those are stupid information gathering things for social engineering, right? There's a movie that happens in a movie anyway that I can't remember off the top of my head. It was a dumb movie anyway. You shouldn't watch it. But that's social engineering. Learning about an organization, learning about a person, learning about their role in an organization, what they may have access to, what they may do on a daily basis. Maybe they talk to these vendors. Maybe they talk to these business partners, right? That's social engineering, to try to get that information, to craft an attack more precisely with actual pertinent personal information that was socially engineered. So all of these got spearphished. This is extremely common. Spear phishing is not just saying the dear sir or madam phishing, it is targeting a specific person. I may pretend to be Jennifer from accounting, and I'm emailing Craig, the CFO, and I'm not really Jennifer from accounting, but Craig, because of social engineering, is so used to getting an email from Jennifer in accounting that he doesn't think about it. He doesn't look at that from address, right? Again, if that's getting through in the first place, you have some misconfigurations there and you need to address that. We can help. But it will still, we can't stop 100% of these emails, especially these very, very smartly clevered, I just said smartly clevered, very cleverly engineered social engineering campaigns. We can't stop them all, right? And remember, with social engineering, you could have a vendor get compromised. The emails coming to you from that vendor are legitimate. That is the legitimate exchange online email coming from that vendor coming to your enclave. They've been compromised and breached. They are spear phishing you or social engineering you from a legitimate account. It is not, they are pretending to be them, but they are really them as far as the systems are concerned, if that makes sense. So remember, that's a possibility too. And our spam filtering and our spoof intelligence doesn't do a great job there because it's a legitimate account from a legitimate person that you legitimately do business with all the time. It just happens to be an illegitimate person accessing those legitimate accounts and systems. Tricky, right? We do have defense for that, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Anyway, spear phishing. These are phishing campaigns that specifically go in and target certain people, HR, finance, leadership, operations, right? They are addressed to a person's name as opposed to a generic warning, right? And they're very good. They use social engineering, and all these accounts got compromised. So in our first example, the W-4s were accessed. HR systems were breached with compromised HR user account. This attacker knew that just using this HR account to send out other phishing emails, a phishing chain reaction we call them, that's not as valuable as going in and realizing that it's probably the same password that you just got, that will access some HR data, or maybe I'm going to go around SharePoint. Oh, here's the HR site. Oh, here within this HR site, here's everyone's W-4. Guess what? Now everyone has to race a malicious foreign actor to file their tax returns forever, right? It happened to me and a company a while ago. My W-4 was compromised, and I have fraudulent tax return attempts every year now, and I have a special PIN set up with the IRS, and you love it, right? Well, here's the thing: your users can sue you for this. If you get their personal financial information breached because of your security or compliance negligence, your users can sue you. Your vendors and partners can sue you for that. So you definitely want to do this work. So those HR systems in this first case were compromised. That information was exfiltrated before the client even knew what was going on. We weren't, again, we had not done security work for this client. They had declined in the past. On the second one, this is almost the best case scenario, and this is what we see the most common. So you will get phished from one of your vendors, or you will phish one of your vendors or business partners or organizations, whatever, because an account there will get compromised. They will send out phishing emails to you from a legitimate sender. Again, we've been over this. It's a legit organization. It's a legit business partner. You legitimately do business with them all the time. They just happen to get breached. So they try to breach you, and then they breach you, and they use you to breach your business partners and everyone in your global address list. So this compromised account phishes all other employees in the organization and everyone in the address book of that account. It's a script that runs. It's not even a person. It's not someone sitting there hitting send on these emails. It's an automatic script that runs. So we need to block those too. In this third example, though, this is one of the most interesting ones that I've seen, is that they went in and they high complexity social engineer. They broke into a CEO's account of our client, and they broke into a common vendor account of another tenant that we don't do business with, right? And what they did is, this is one person, this is one attacker. I love the ingenuity here. It's nefarious and horrible, but I have to give them credit for how clever this was. But they compromised both those accounts. Instead of doing anything nefarious, they're probably trying to access financial data. Maybe there was an MFA prompt and it didn't work for an on-prem system, whatever. So what they did was they started a whole fake conversation. They went through the email of the CEO and the vendor, right, that they've compromised these two accounts. And they found previous conversations of the CEO and the vendor that they had. And they started a reply all chain to these. They said, hey, I'm going to make up names here. Hey, Jim, nice speaking with you last week. I'm wondering about those trucks, right? So this vendor has sold fleet trucks to our client CEO before in the past. How do we know this? Well, the attacker went through the email of each one and they socially engineered it. Who are these two people? What do they do? How do they talk to each other? How can I exploit this information? So what they did is they go through, they read all the emails, they find some talking about buying trucks, and they start a new fake email chain. Hey, Jim. Oh, hey, Bob. How's it going? Oh, pretty good. How are the kids? Oh, they're great. Yeah. Hey, I'd like to get a new order of trucks. Oh, yeah, that's right. You wanted that new order of trucks. Well, here. And they go back and forth, 6 or 7 emails. It's genius. This whole fake conversation, right? Finally, it gets to Bob sending Jim an invoice. Hey, I'm glad we could work this out. Here's the invoice for those trucks. $250,000, no big deal, right? You get six trucks for that, fleet trucks. So then Jim just casually sends it over to his controller, right? Saying, hey, I have another order in from Bob over at vendor to buy more trucks. Here you go. Can you please get a PO going for, and then reach out to Bob to get this PO going. Now, it almost worked, right? This attack almost worked, and we have other clients and we have other, organizations that we've engaged with in the past that aren't clients. They're, they didn't decide to be a client where this worked. This honeypot worked, right? So what happened was the controller said, wait a second, why would we just be randomly buying $250,000 worth of trucks right now? So her stopping and thinking was the only thing that stopped them losing $250,000. That's it, right? So she stopped, she thought, which is what we ask everyone to do all the time, is something weird? Stop, right? Don't click on that web page. Don't answer that email. Don't go buy your boss iTunes gift cards. Your boss isn't going to just randomly ask you to buy iTunes gift cards. What are you doing? She stopped. She thought. She asked the CEO outside of email, did you send me this? And he's like, no. And then we figured out there's a breach, right? But what would happen is she'd just do the purchase order, go to some bank account in Thailand, and that money would never be seen from again, right? And this is a very clever one, and this one works all the time. And you probably know someone, your spouse's company, some cousin you know, someone who this scheme or some form of it has worked, right? So it's effective. If it wasn't effective, they wouldn't do it. That one was super interesting. I have to give them credit. Now, the commonality in all these here is that they were lacking defense in depth. As soon as they got into that first account, they had keys to the kingdom, right? So again, I'm not going to go over detailed defense in depth and what that means specifically for email defense perimeters or identity defense in depth. I did defense in depth identity on a previous session that you should go listen to now. It was pretty good overview of that, but that's the common thing here, right? You need to do security. It's no longer an option. If you have per user MFA, that's a great start. You need to do more. If you have a good SPF record, that's a great start. You need to do more, right? And even if you're doing your email and identity security very well, you need to start doing device security in a meaningful way. Doing group policy and Windows updates and Symantec, no, that is not good enough anymore. You need to do protected browser, cloud-based drive encryption, attack surface reduction. We do a bunch of really impactful and important work these days in the device space. And then you need to start working on data protection, right? How can we have legitimate and quasi-legitimate and illegitimate data sharing be protected? We're not talking about breaches here. We're talking about someone accidentally sending a credit card number in plain text on an email, right? So you need to think about doing all of these things holistically. We always start with identities for obvious reasons here that we just saw, right? These were all identity breach vectors, which is about 95% of breaches these days are identity layer. So it's the most important, it's the most vulnerable, it's the most impactful. But then we move on into apps, devices, data, right? And network and infrastructure. So it's really important to do all this work, think about all of this. The concepts are not rocket science. The application and complexity can be a lot, but we're happy to take you through it, and we're getting extremely good at our work because it's a constantly changing landscape. Not only do we have constant new products and services from Microsoft and our other third-party vendors, but we have a constantly changing threat landscape. So even things that we were doing 2 or 3 years ago that were solidified security are no longer accurate, right? They're no longer pervasive or nuanced enough to be effective at threat management these days. So that's it in a nutshell, what happened, how it happened. So again, I just wanted to remind us, what does zero trust mean? What is he talking about? What are these pillars, right? What are these core concepts? Just to hammer this into your head. This is the thing. This isn't just a buzzword. This isn't just some fancy new enterprise thing. This is the thing from here on out. You need to learn zero trust, you need to implement zero trust, and you need to live and breathe zero trust for the rest of your days, because it is on-prem, it is cloud, it is data security and compliance, right? And it is critically important. So the first thing zero trust is verify explicitly. We do not like location trusts. Oh, you happen to be on-prem? Yeah, no security policies hit you. Come on. We always verify every authentication attempt. That includes backend servers, SQL database work, everything, right? Logging into a device, logging into an app, a person, a service account. We have explicit verification at all times on all services. Use least privilege access. This is not just for admins, right? We do RBAC, role-based access control. We do LPA, least privilege access. We do PIM, privileged identity management. That means that we do just in time. We have some clients where there's no standing admins, right? You elevate your admin credentials and privileges for 2 hours. You get in, you get out, you de-elevate. You have to do MFA. You have to do a justification. It's linked to a ticketing system, right? So we do that for admins. Very powerful. But we also need to do this for your users and your vendors and your guests. Stop hitting the easy button. Oh, just give them access to that whole site. Oh, just create an account for them. No. Think about least privilege access for everyone and everything in your environment. Admins, Internal users, external users and guests, service accounts. Least privilege access for all of those things all the time, right? And then of course, the most scary one, assume breach. And why do we assume breach? Because you are getting breached all the time. You have insider threats, you have perimeter defenses failing, you have phishing emails getting through, you have potential nefarious actors in your on-prem, cloud, or both environments, right? You need to assume breach, and what are you gonna do about it, right? Not, oh, we're gonna do all these things, and then if we ever get attacked, we're gonna do this. No, you're being attacked now. It's happening right now, all over the place, all the time, from all vectors. And what are you going to do about it since they're already probably in at least a couple layers of your defenses? Do you have a couple layers of your defenses? That's assume breach, right? It's your couple first layers will fail. You almost certainly already have a nefarious actor within your environment, and you have insider threats that you need to deal with once you solidify your defense and depth strategy, because you'll have people sharing info they shouldn't. You'll have people leaving the company stealing info. That is a breach. That is a threat. That does not have to do with someone from a foreign country breaking into your accounts. That is your own people exfiltrating data. So that's zero trust. We use policy engines to enforce access from identities and devices into data, apps, infrastructure, and network. Again, admin roles, inside users, guests and external, service accounts, devices, apps, data, all accessing within network and infrastructure. All make sense? Good. Great. I will see you next week for our fourth and final session, where we're going to go over, we're going to end on a good note as opposed to this this more scary kind of what happened post-mortem stuff. So we're going to end on a really good note. You're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel again. And as always, we're here to help. If you want to chat security, you have any questions about engagements or licensing or anything else, hit me up. I'm sorry we ran out of time for questions today. I apologize, but I will see you next week. And please go revisit the other sessions if you didn't have a chance to see them already. So thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.